The Night Before podcast.
Kerrang Radio.
Kerrang! It's The Night Before. My name's Margerrison. Welcome to the show. So, you may or may not be aware, there's a big film coming out, and it's called The Watchmen. They've been promoting it for ages. I love comic books, and this film is based on a comic book, one of the biggest comic books ever published, called The Watchmen. And the writer of that comic book, we've got him with us at the moment. His name's Alan Moore. Alan Moore, welcome to the show.
Hi, good to be here, Nick.
I mean, you must be over the moon. There's a big film, The Watchmen, that's coming out. It's based on a comic book that you wrote. I mean, it must be really exciting.
I don't think over the moon is quite the phrase that I myself would use. Under the ground, with my lack of enthusiasm, would probably be closer to the mark. I am incredibly curmudgeonly, and not without good cause, I think, about all of the film adaptations of my work. I haven't seen any of them.
You've not watched a single film?
Not a single film. I mean, I don't watch many films in general, but I decided early on that it would be much too painful an experience for me to watch any of the films that have been made of my work.
Let me just tell the nation, for people who don't know, the films that have been made that are based on comic books that you wrote, there's V for Vendetta, there's From Hell, which has got Johnny Depp in it, and there's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which I actually walked out of halfway through. So those are the three sort of biggies, and you've not seen a single one of those. No,
and nor have I seen my first exposure to having my work turned into films, Swamp Thing Returns, which they mangled and made ludicrous, and this was my first exposure to seeing my work turned into a film, and it probably coloured a lot of the stuff that followed. And also, by the same contract, coincidentally, because I'd introduced in one of my issues of Swamp Thing a British occultist, a kind of wide boy South London British occultist called John Constantine. This enabled the film company to produce the Keanu Reeves Constantine movie that was out a couple of years back. I haven't seen any of these because all I'd be doing is looking at how my work was being turned into something that it wasn't meant to be, how it was being mangled, misrepresented. I mean, I decided early on that, yes, if people wanted to give me money for these films, that I'd take the money and I wouldn't be a fair critic of the film, so I'd just keep out of that. Right. I'd just keep a distance and maintain that my books are my books, the film is something else. Okay, so you decided to do that, and you decided to take the money from it. So, I mean, the Watchmen film's coming out. You're going to be minted, surely. I mean, there's going to be so much money from that coming your way. Well, this was back in the early days. I was in a much better mood with movies back in the day. I mean, I'm talking about, this is back in the 80s, when I thought, yeah, if they want to make the movies, I don't think that they're going to do a very good job of it, but I'll take the money. I remember meeting with Terry Gilliam. This was sometime back in the late 80s, because Terry Gilliam was supposed to be making the Watchmen movie. This is how long that they've been talking about doing it. And I sat and had a talk with Terry, as I call him, Tell, you know. We had a nice Indian meal together, and he said, how would you go about making the Watchmen into a film, Alan? And I said, well, if anybody had asked me, Terry, Tell, I said, I'd have told them that I wouldn't have done. Because I don't think that you can make Watchmen into a film. It wasn't designed to be a film. It was designed to be a comic. It was done specifically so that it would show off the things that comics are capable of and that comics alone are capable of. I think that that's the conclusion that he eventually came to. That's one that I read him saying in later interviews when he was asked about what had happened to the Watchmen film. So that was my stance at the time. And also at that time, I didn't really believe that any of these films would ever get made. And that worked fine until they actually went ahead and made one of them, which was From Hell. And as soon as this became a reality, I thought, okay, well, how am I going to handle this? I thought, okay, I don't want to see it, but I don't want to give any offence to the people making the film. I want to make it just clear to them that their film is their film. I don't want to interfere with it, and I consider it as something separate to my book, you know, and then that should all go all right. However, that seemed to be working okay until the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen film, when I had quite a horrendous set of circumstances. I didn't want people to see these films and think, well, I guess that's what the book must have been like.
It's Kerrang Radio. It's the night before. We're talking to Alan Moore. Listen, on the way next, I'm going to ask him the question that every single fan of comic books wants to know. Do I have his permission to see the Watchmen film? Talking to him next here on Kerrang.
The night before with Nick Margerrison.
Podcast.
Kerrang Radio.
It's Kerrang Radio. It's the night before. We're talking to the writer of V for Vendetta, the original comic book, that is. We're talking to the writer of The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the original comic book, that is. And we're talking to the writer of the Watchmen comic book. It's just been turned into a film, and I'm now going to ask him the question that's been on my mind for years, on behalf of all of the fans of your work, right, myself included. Do we go and watch this film?
That is entirely up to you. I am an anarchist. I do not believe that I should be directing anybody's behaviour. That is entirely up to you. My reasons for not seeing it are that it was perfect as a comic book. That was how it was intended. It will not be improved by being translated to another medium. It will make it louder and flashier and probably perhaps more appealing to today's demographic audience. I don't know. I would urge you, read the book first. And if you still feel the need to go and see the film after you've read the book, then I'm not stopping you, and I won't think any the less of you.
Maybe if I send you a copy of... I got it on pirate DVD, right? Maybe if I send...
No. I still won't be watching this. I will not be sharing your viewing pleasure, if pleasure there be.
I'll pop round. We'll have a cup of coffee, right? I'll get it on pirate. We won't spend any money on it.
Yeah, well, I did read something with the director early in the day where he said, well, the worst possible result, I think that Alan will look at this at his home in London, and he'll say, well, that's not too bad. And like, when someone passed this quote on to me, I said, and like, that is the worst possible result
You don't
that he could imagine. I mean, I don't live in London, and I'm never going to watch this thing. And it is better for him that I don't. Already, I mean, it just seems like such a pointless exercise that the complexity of Watchmen will not be evident upon the screen, because I was doing it so that you can get that complexity, because it's a comic book, because people can stare at the panels for as long as it takes them to understand all of the clever little things that are going on in the background, all of the clever little things in the dialogue. When you're in a cinema, or even when you're watching it at home, that stuff is all flashing past you at 24 frames a second. You haven't got the ability, like you have with a comic book, to actually check out all these little connections. And
yeah, because for the people who haven't read The Watchmen, it is one of those things where you start referring back and you're going, oh, hang on, that picture looks like this picture over here. And it's quite a head-battering experience to read it.
And there were fake articles and stories and pieces of writing in the back of the book that told you a little bit more about the world of the characters and how the story was fitting together. It was, there are lots of things that we could only do in a comic book. And it was mainly about, as I said earlier, it was about the things that we were doing to comic book storytelling. But I understand that not everybody sees things from my perspective. So what I'd say is read the works first, then decide if you still want to see the films.
Kerrang is the night before. Alan Moore, thanks for joining us on the show. I don't know if I'm going to watch it or not. I feel like I don't want to, but I feel like I want to as well because I like the comic book, you know, and oh man, my head's in bits. Listen, Alan Moore, thanks for joining us, man. You're a friend of the show.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Nick. You take care of yourself.
It's Kerrang, it's the night before.
Kerrang Radio. The night before with Nick Margerrison.